Fear usually arrived in the galaxy with noise, warships screaming out of hyperspace, planet crackers humming with power, armies marching in perfect, terrifying lines. Every great nightmare the galaxy remembered had been loud. So when fear arrived quietly, no one recognized it at first. The human delegation entered the Galactic Council Hall with no guards, no armor, and no weapons. At the center of them walked a single man wearing simple gray robes. His hands were empty. His steps were slow. His back was straight, but not proud. His name was Father Elias. To the watching aliens, he looked harmless. Too small, too old, too human. The council chamber was built to intimidate. The ceiling vanished into darkness. The floor was polished black stone that reflected the shapes of those who ruled the stars. Around the circular hall sat beings who had burned worlds and erased civilizations. Some had claws resting on armrests. Some had metal limbs that hummed softly. Some did not even have bodies, only shapes of light and thought, and all of them were watching the human priest. Standing beside him was Lyra Thay, a young alien girl chosen as his translator. Her species had survived by serving stronger empires, so she knew fear well. She had studied humans carefully before this assignment. She knew their wars, their anger, their history of destruction. But this man confused her. She expected a soldier, a diplomat, maybe a scientist, not a priest. He carried an old book pressed gently against his chest. Its pages were worn, its cover cracked. It looked ancient, even by human standards. Lyra glanced at it and almost laughed from nervousness. This is who they sent? She thought. This fragile man? A deep voice rolled across the hall, vibrating through bone and metal alike. Human, said the warlord of Karks, a towering creature covered in scars and ceremonial blades. You stand before the conquerors of 7,000 systems. Speak quickly. Lyra translated, her voice slightly unsteady. Father Elias listened without moving. When she finished, he nodded politely, as if someone had simply asked him the time. I thank you for allowing me to speak, he said calmly. His voice was soft. Too soft. The council reacted with faint amusement. Some emitted sounds that meant laughter. Others flickered with mild curiosity. No one felt threatened. Yet, Father Elias took one step forward. His sandals echoed quietly on the stone floor. I am not here to beg, he continued. And I am not here to threaten. Lyra frowned. She translated anyway. The warlord leaned closer. Then why are you here, little human? The priest lifted his eyes, and for a brief moment, Lyra felt like the air had changed. I am here, Father Elias said, because you have made a terrible mistake. Murmurs rippled through the chamber. The warlord's many eyes narrowed. Explain. Father Elias placed his hand on the old book. You studied humanity, he said. You watched our wars. You saw our weapons. You measured our strength. He paused, but you never tried to understand our faith. The word echoed strangely when Lyra translated it. Some council members laughed openly now. Faith? One of them mocked. Belief in invisible things? Father Elias did not smile. Faith, he said gently, is what remains when everything else is taken. Lyra felt her hands tighten around the translator device. The priest's voice grew heavier, not louder. You burned human colonies. You erased our worlds. You turned our children into refugees and our elders into ashes. His eyes were calm, but deep like an ocean before a storm. And you thought, he continued, that by doing so, you would break us. The lights above flickered once. Just once. Most did not notice. Lyra did. You were wrong. Father Elias said. The room fell quiet. You did not destroy our faith, he finished. You sharpened it. For the first time since entering the chamber, Lyra felt true fear, not of the council, but of the quiet human priest who stood unarmed before gods, and did not bow. The council erupted in laughter, not soft laughter, not polite amusement. Deep, guttural sounds rolled through the hall like thunder across an empty plain. Metallic clicks, chittering screeches, and psychic ripples of mockery bounced from one end of the chamber to the other. Every alien, from the smallest to the oldest, joined in. Lyra Thea's many eyes widened. She gripped the translator device tightly. She had expected fear in this hall. But the human's priest? He had no weapon, no army, no protection. And yet, he was unafraid. A priest. One of the elder aliens hissed, clicking its jaws. You send a priest to us? To conquerors of stars. The warlord of Karks bared its teeth, a snarl that could cut stone. This is absurd. Let us show him how fragile humans are. Lyra tried to hide her worry. She had studied the histories of alien wars. Every species laughed before war. Every time. And every time death followed. She whispered to herself, this is it. He is finished. But Father Elias did not move. Not a step. Not a blink. He opened the old book in his hands and ran a finger along the worn pages. The sound of turning paper was almost musical in the tension-filled chamber. You believe strength is only in weapons, he said softly. You believe fear is created with fire, with claws, with blood. The aliens leaned closer, curious now. One of the younger council members tilted its head. Lyra translated each word, her voice trembling slightly. Father Elias lifted his eyes and spoke to the hall, not just the aliens, but somehow to all the worlds they had destroyed. I have walked battlefields where the smoke never lifted, where human soldiers lay dying with screams in their throats. I have held children whose families were burned before their eyes. I have listened to the whispers of those who begged mercy from monsters like you. Lyra felt her chest tighten. She had studied humans for years. She had read about their wars, their bravery, their cruelty. But hearing this man speak, it felt different. It felt alive, real. You think you are gods because you destroy, he said, turning the pages slowly, deliberately. But destroying does not create fear. It awakens faith. Some of the older aliens stiffened. Faint memories stirred in their minds. Buried long ago. Names, worlds, cities, echoes. Of screams they had tried to forget. Lyra saw it in there. Eyes, unease, worry. Fear, though, none would admit. You have taken everything from humanity, the priest continued. Our homes, our families, our very worlds. You believed that would break us. You believed we would bow. You believed we would forget. He closed the book with a soft thunk. You were wrong. The silence that followed was heavy, like a vacuum filled with something invisible. The laughter had stopped. Even the warlord of Karks's claws stilled on the armrests. You do not know humans, Father Elias said. You cannot know what it means to endure. To lose everything and still rise. To be surrounded by monsters and still choose hope. Lyra felt a shiver crawl down her spine. She realized she was holding her breath. The hall itself seemed to pause. Every alien, from the smallest clerk to the largest warlord, could feel that something had changed. Some of you, Elias said, his voice almost gentle now, have killed millions. You have thought yourselves untouchable. But there is one thing you cannot destroy. He paused. His eyes swept the room, resting briefly on Lyra. She swallowed hard. Faith, he said. Faith endures. Faith remembers. Faith judges. The warlord growled low in its throat, but it did not step forward. Others whispered among themselves in tones that carried a hint of panic. No alien had ever spoken of faith like this, and no alien had ever dared to imply that humans could remember. And Father Elias's lips curved in a small, calm smile. You laughed at me when I arrived unarmed, he said. You will laugh no longer. Lyra felt her hands shake. Her species had studied humans for centuries. They had written them off as emotional, fragile, and unpredictable. But this man, this frail human priest, he radiated a power that went beyond weapons, beyond claws, beyond armies. It was something they could not touch. Something they could not destroy. Something they could not control. And for the first time, Lyra realized the truth. Humans were not weak. They were unstoppable in ways the galaxy had never understood. Father Elias closed his book, and the chamber shivered, though no one could say why. The laughter had died. The council stared, uncertain. Something had begun. Something that even the most powerful aliens could not yet name, and the human priest remained calm. The chamber was silent now, but the silence was heavy. The aliens had expected humans to break, to beg, to tremble. They had expected weakness. Instead, they found calm. Father Elias stepped forward, his robes flowing gently with each movement. He did not raise his voice. He did not make a gesture of power. But something unseen seemed to ripple through the room. Something made the air feel dense, like a weight pressing on the bones. Lyra Thay felt it first. Her many eyes widened, and she gripped the translator device tightly. She had seen humans fight with weapons, yes. She had heard of their courage. But what she was witnessing now was something else entirely. The priest opened his book again. He ran his fingers along the worn pages. Then he began to speak, not in anger, not in hatred, but in calm, steady words that carried through every corner of the chamber. He spoke names, names of human heroes who had died defending the weak. Names of children who had whispered prayers even as bombs fell around them. Names of cities that had risen from ashes again and again. Names of people who had faced extinction, famine, and betrayal, yet still held on to hope. At first, the aliens thought it was a story, a simple memory, but then it began to weave into reality. Screens in the council chamber flickered to life, showing images of human history. Soldiers charging across broken fields. Children helping strangers to safety. Entire civilizations refusing to bow even when everything around them burned. Lyra's hands shook as she translated. Each word seemed to carry weight, to bend the light in the room. She had never seen anything like it. The aliens themselves began to shift, some trembling, some stepping back, and some clutching their heads as though the memories themselves hurt. One of the council elders, a being older than most stars, hissed, "Impossible. These are mere legends, human exaggerations." Father Elias looked at him gently. "Not legends, memory, history, truth. And truth is stronger than any weapon you wield." The room pulsed. The lights flickered. Energy shields quivered. Devices meant to display alien supremacy failed one by one. The aliens realized with rising panic that they could not control what he was showing them. They could not stop it. They could not erase it. "You have believed that erasing history erases pain," the priest said softly. "But you cannot erase memory. You cannot erase faith. And faith remembers everything." Some of the younger council members cried out. Some older ones froze, unable to move. Their ancient minds, used to ruling by fear, could not comprehend this. A human weak, small, unarmed, was turning their own history against them. Not by force, but by truth. Lyra Thay felt tears running down her face. She realized then that she had misjudged humans her entire life. She had believed them fragile, emotional, weak. But Father Elias was showing her a power the galaxy had never measured. The unbreakable strength of humanity's spirit. The priest's voice grew firmer, more commanding, yet still gentle. "You have killed countless lives, and you believed no one would remember. You have destroyed worlds, and you believed humans would submit. But submission is not our way. We endure, we fight, we forgive, and we remember." The chamber shook with a strange force, felt but unseen. Energy barriers flickered. Alien voices trembled. Some attempted to resist, but Father Elias's words had become something alive, something that carried the weight of every human who had ever suffered injustice. The warlord of Karks roared in fury. "Stop this! Stop him! He is only a man." Father Elias turned to him, calm as a still lake. "A man?" he said softly. "I am one human among billions. And yet, even I carry the weight of countless souls, countless memories. You cannot fight that. You cannot destroy that. You cannot escape it." Suddenly, the restraints holding Father Elias shattered. Sparks flew. The aliens gasped, not understanding. But the priest did not move with violence. He simply raised his hand, and the room itself seemed to listen. Lyra fell to her knees. She whispered to herself, How can one human do this?" Father Elias knelt beside her, placing a hand gently on her shoulder. "I am not a warrior," he said softly. "I am a witness. And the universe has forgotten how dangerous a witness can be." The aliens staggered back. Some shrieked. Some fell to their knees in fear. Some tried to flee, but the doorway seemed farther than before. The human's memory, his faith, and the stories of countless dead had become a force no alien could resist. For the first time, the council understood they were not facing weapons. They were facing the unforgettable will of a human soul. And in that moment, Lyra realized the truth. The galaxy's nightmares were not starships, not lasers, not claws. The galaxy's nightmares were humans who refused to forget and who refused to give up hope. Father Elias closed his book. He stood slowly, calmly, and his eyes scanned the room. "This is not vengeance," he said. "This is memory. And memory will never fail." Even the strongest beings in the galaxy felt it. Fear, not of death, but of a human who could never be broken. The chamber trembled with silence. The council's laughter had vanished, replaced by something heavier: confusion, fear, and disbelief. No alien had ever seen this before. A human, unarmed, standing in front of gods and conquerors, bending the air with words alone. Lyra Thay fell to her knees. She had been studying humans for years, analyzing their history, their wars, their strengths. She had believed humans were fragile, unpredictable, and emotional. But this human priest, Father Elias, was proving her wrong in ways she could barely comprehend. The priest's voice remained calm, almost gentle, but each word carried weight. He spoke of courage that transcended time. He spoke of children who had shielded strangers while bombs fell around them. He spoke of soldiers who had died countless times over, defending hope when all seemed lost. "You see them," Father Elias said, looking around the council chamber, as weak as prey. "But you are wrong. You have never understood humans because you have never faced our memory. You have never faced our faith. You have never faced our refusal to surrender." Some of the council members shrieked, their voices trembling with fear they could not name. The older, ancient ones swayed on their thrones, as if the very truth of his words was shaking them to their cores. Some tried to flee, but the room seemed to grow taller, darker, heavier, as if the memory of countless human suffering weighed down on the walls. Lyra Thay felt tears stream down her cheeks. Her species had always survived by serving stronger empires, by hiding fear, by obeying power. And yet here she was, watching a single human make every being in this chamber reconsider their very existence. She could not believe her eyes. "You have killed without conscience," Father Elias continued softly, yet every word struck like a hammer. "You have erased homes, torn families apart, and destroyed worlds. You believed that by taking everything, you could control everything. But you underestimated us. You forgot that humans endure. We remember. And when we remember, we grow stronger." Lyra shook. She had translated countless speeches in her life, but never had her voice trembled like this. She looked at the priest, her confusion and fear mixing with awe. He is not using weapons, she whispered to herself. And yet, he is unstoppable. One of the council members, a massive creature with 4 limbs ending in razor claws, tried to roar, to intimidate him. Stop, you cannot. Father Elias raised his hand slowly. No motion, no gesture of violence. Yet the air itself seemed to pulse, vibrating with a strange force. The alien froze mid-step. It stumbled backward as though invisible chains had seized it. You fear what you do not understand, the priest said quietly. You fear memory, you fear faith, and you fear justice. I am not here to fight you with swords or cannons. I am here to remind you that humans never forget. Lyra Thay realized then the horrifying truth. Humans did not need weapons to be dangerous. Humans carried their history, their pain, their triumphs, and their suffering as a living power. And this power, unlike any weapon, could not be destroyed. The older aliens began to whisper among themselves, voices trembling. Some pleaded silently, bowing on the floor, hoping for mercy they had never known. Others looked at each other with fear. They were the greatest warriors, the oldest, the strongest. Yet they had never felt so powerless. Lyra fell to the floor, overwhelmed. She could feel the weight of every world destroyed by her people's hands and by the council's decisions. She had been raised to admire strength, to obey power, to survive by bending. And yet here she was, watching a human priest shatter everything she had believed. Father Elias knelt beside her. His hand was gentle on her shoulder. Do not fear, Lyra, he said softly. I am not a warrior. I am a witness. And sometimes witnessing truth is more powerful than conquering worlds. Her tears fell freely now. I cannot believe this, she whispered. One human. And they are all afraid. Father Elias smiled faintly, his eyes kind but burning with a strange fire. It is not me they fear. It is what humanity represents. Our endurance. Our memory. Our faith. We are small, fragile, emotional. Yes. But we are unbreakable when we refuse to give up, when we refuse to forget, when we refuse to surrender. The council roared in frustration. Some trying to flee, some screaming, some shaking with fear that words alone had summoned. Lyra saw that the strongest, most ruthless aliens in the galaxy, beings who had destroyed countless species, were reduced to trembling, uncertain shapes. She could not help but gasp. Her heart pounded. She realized the truth that humans had always known, but the galaxy had never understood. Humanity's greatest power was never in weapons or numbers or machines. It was in its soul. And in that moment, Lyra Thay knew that this small, quiet priest, this human who seemed so ordinary, had become something far more terrifying than any monster, any weapon, any empire. He was a reminder that humans remembered everything and forgave nothing that deserved punishment. For the first time, Lyra understood. The galaxy's true nightmare was not the wars humans fought. It was their faith, their memory, and their unyielding spirit. And Father Elias was the living proof of it. News traveled faster than light. Across countless star systems, whispers spread through the alien networks like wildfire. A human priest has broken the Galactic Council. No weapons fired. No armies marched. No wars were declared. Yet every species that heard the story felt a cold fear settle deep in their bones. Father Elias had become a name the galaxy could not ignore. The Council's greatest conquerors, the most feared warlords, and the oldest empires had all faced him, and none had stood unshaken. Lyra Thay watched the aftermath. She had followed the priest across chambers, systems, and worlds. Everywhere he went, the same pattern emerged. The aliens did not understand him. They underestimated him. They laughed, and then everything changed. They call him a priest, Lyra whispered, translating for herself more than anyone else. But he is something else entirely. Father Elias walked calmly through alien corridors filled with trembling officials and soldiers. His robes were simple, his book worn and quiet in his hands. Yet wherever he stepped, power followed, not the power of weapons, but the power of truth, memory, and faith. The priest did not kill. He did not threaten. He spoke, and the aliens listened. "You believed you were invincible," he said to a trembling commander who had commanded fleets that could destroy planets. "You believed that death could silence humanity. You believed our suffering would break us." The commander's claws shook. We have killed billions of your kind. We have erased entire systems." Father Elias nodded, his expression calm, almost sorrowful. "Yes," he said. "And yet here I stand. I am not alone. For every human you have destroyed, millions more remember. They remember your cruelty. They remember your lies. And they remember the strength it takes to survive, to forgive, and to rise again." Lyra Thay felt tears prick her eyes. She had grown up learning that humans were fragile, that they could be manipulated, controlled, and destroyed. And yet, watching him, she realized her entire understanding had been wrong. Humans were not fragile. Humans were unstoppable, not because of armies, but because of their will. Across the galaxy, alien leaders began to crumble. Some surrendered instantly, begging for mercy they had never offered. Others fled, terrified of what humanity could do when it refused to forget. And some simply watched in silent dread, knowing they had underestimated a species that could endure anything. Father Elias paused in the middle of a council chamber on one distant world. He raised his voice, calm but carrying through every corner. "You have all believed that humans are weak, that we can be erased. You have made a terrible mistake. Humans never forget. And humans never stop." A young alien diplomat whispered to Lyra, voice trembling, "Why? Why does he frighten us so?" Lyra had no words. She only watched as the priest walked among them, unarmed, unafraid, unshakable. He did not strike. He did not shout. And yet, the fear he inspired was deeper than any weapon. "It is not him you fear," Lyra finally whispered to herself. "It is what humanity represents." The galaxy began to understand that humans' true power was not in conquering, nor in destroying, nor in dominating. Their power was endurance, memory, and belief. A human could rise from ashes, forgive what deserved it, punish what needed punishment, and inspire millions all without raising a sword. In the council chambers, the warlords whispered among themselves. He is not a fighter," one admitted. "He is something we cannot fight, something we cannot control." Lyra Thay's heart pounded as she watched Father Elias quietly turn pages in his worn book, walking calmly through beings who had once laughed at his arrival. Those laughs were gone. Only silence, dread, and respect remained. The priest stopped before the oldest alien in the room, a being whose kind had ruled countless star systems with iron claws and psychic dominance. "Do not mistake mercy for weakness," Father Elias said softly. "You will live. Not because you deserve it, not because you are strong, but because humans choose mercy even when vengeance would be easier. Remember that." The alien bowed, not fully, but enough to understand the weight of his words. Lyra watched, amazed as a single human, the smallest, quietest, and least armed being, had become the galaxy's most terrifying figure. Not for violence, not for conquest, but for something far older, far deeper, far stronger. Faith, memory, endurance, humanity itself. And she knew then, without doubt, that the galaxy would never forget Father Elias, and that every empire, every warlord, And every conqueror who crossed humans would carry the memory of that day for the rest of their lives. He had become the nightmare of the stars. And Lyra Thay, once a skeptic, could not believe her eyes. The council chambers were a ruin of fear. Aliens who had once laughed, mocked, and commanded entire galaxies now trembled in silence. Their pride, their power, their arrogance, all of it had crumbled under the quiet authority of a human priest. Lyra Thay knelt beside Father Elias, still struggling to understand what she had witnessed. Her species had studied humans for centuries. They had thought humans fragile, chaotic, unpredictable. Yet here was one human, a single man dressed in simple robes, carrying nothing but a worn book, who had humbled the greatest powers in the galaxy. Why? Lyra whispered, her voice barely audible. Why do they fear you so much? You do not fight them. You do not destroy them. You only speak. Father Elias looked at her gently. His eyes were calm, but burning with quiet fire. It is not me they fear, he said softly. They fear the memory of every human who ever suffered. They fear the truth. And they fear what will happen if humans ever stop forgiving. Lyra shivered. She could feel the weight of his words. It was more terrifying than any weapon she had ever seen. The remaining council members bowed before him, some trembling with shame, others with desperate hope. One of them, a massive alien whose claws had crushed entire armies, spoke in a trembling voice. Please, spare us. We will change. We will obey. We will respect the humans. Father Elias nodded slowly, closing his book with a soft thunk. The room seemed to exhale as if waiting for him to speak again. You will live, he said quietly. Not because you deserve it. Not because you are strong. But because humans choose mercy, even when vengeance would be easier. Lyra Thay's eyes widened. She had expected fury. She had expected punishment. She had expected the humans to finally strike back for all they had endured. But instead, Father Elias chose restraint. The aliens did not understand. Some blinked in disbelief. Some whispered to one another, why would he spare us? After everything? Father Elias raised his hand, not in threat, but in calm authority. You have learned something very important today, he said. You have learned that power is not always measured in weapons or armies. It is measured in endurance, in truth, in the courage to forgive. You have also learned that humans remember everything. And when we do, we act, but always with purpose, and always with wisdom. The room was still. Even the strongest beings in the galaxy dared not move. They had felt his power, seen its reach, and realized that violence would not change anything. Humanity's strength was something no one could fight, no one could destroy, and no one could underestimate ever again. Lyra Thay knelt quietly, tears streaming down her face. She had grown up believing that humans were fragile, emotional, and unpredictable. And yet, she had just witnessed the most formidable demonstration of power she had ever seen, not through destruction, but through patience, memory, and mercy. Do you understand now, Lyra? Father Elias asked softly, placing a hand on her shoulder. Humans are not the strongest in muscle or claw or weapon. We are the strongest in spirit, in endurance, in the way we remember and forgive. That is our greatest power. Lyra nodded, unable to speak. The realization settled deep in her heart. Humans had survived countless wars, starvation, betrayal, and extinction attempts. And yet here they were, standing calmly, choosing mercy when it would have been easier to destroy. The council whispered among themselves, some of them shaking with fear and awe. Some bowed low, acknowledging for the first time that humans were not to be underestimated, not for their armies, not for their numbers, not for their technology, but for their soul. Father Elias turned to leave the chamber. Lyra followed, still in shock. Outside, the stars shone quietly, indifferent to the events that had just unfolded. And yet, Something in the galaxy had changed forever. Aliens would speak of this day for centuries. They would remember it. They would fear it. They would teach their children that one human priest had humbled the greatest powers in the galaxy. Without raising a weapon, as they walked through the halls, Lyra looked up at him. "Will they ever truly understand us?" she asked softly. Father Elias smiled faintly. "Perhaps not," he said. "Perhaps they never will. But they will remember. And that is enough." For the first time, Lyra understood what it truly meant to be human. It was not in power. It was not in fear. It was in the ability to endure, to remember, and to choose mercy. Even when vengeance was easier, even when the galaxy begged for retribution. And in that quiet, simple choice, humanity had become unstoppable. Years passed, but the memory of Father Elias never faded. Across the galaxy, whispers of the human priest became stories, warnings, and lessons. Aliens who had once laughed at humanity now bowed their heads in quiet respect. Some built memorials not of him, but of the humans they had wronged. Lyra Thay had returned to her homeworld, carrying knowledge that few others possessed. She became a teacher, sharing with young aliens the truth about humans. She spoke of courage, endurance, and mercy. She told them how a single human, small and unarmed, had humble,